Molly, and it's another episode of But I Know I Love You. Yep, it's getting exciting. Well, it's always exciting. It's always very interesting, too. Loving this story, and I know a lot of you are loving this story, too. But here we go, another episode, and it might be a little while to the next one because we got to record some more. Yeah, I'm a little tongue-tied today. Okay. Hope you enjoy it. See you at the end. Somebody's ready for a nap.
Unexpected arrival. Camre's last text reassured me, but I still wanted to finish up work as soon as possible so I could get back to the hospital. I felt guilty about leaving her, even though she had wanted me to go, insisted that I go. About an hour after our last text, I was vacuuming up some glass on a job site when I felt my work phone in my hip holster ring. My first thought was that I was going to have to go on another job, but when I looked at the number, my heart sank. It was my mom. She never calls me on my work phone, so I instantly knew that something had to be very wrong. Stephen, Camre had the baby. What? She had the baby? Is everything okay? I don't know. The hospital called and said they had tried to reach you, but you didn't answer your phone. I knew instantly what had happened. I had left my personal cell in my rig, so between that and the vacuum, I hadn't heard the call. Time literally stopped. I was in complete shock. I told my mom I would be there right away, and she added that she was on her way as well. I left all my tools, all my paperwork, everything right there at the job site. I slammed the side door of the van shut, hopped into the driver's seat, and spun my tires as I peeled out. I did have the presence of mind to call my boss, tell him that Camre had the baby, and give him the address where I'd left the equipment, but after that, nothing mattered except Camre and our baby. It was about a 5-minute drive to the hospital, but I made it in 3 minutes. It's a good thing there wasn't a cop on the road. All the while, I kept wondering what had happened, if Camre was okay, if Gavin was okay. I was really disappointed that I hadn't been present when Gavin was born, but most of all, I felt guilty that I hadn't been there when Camre needed me. Even now, I get little twinges of guilt about that. I think it's one of the reasons that I'm so determined to live up to my responsibilities as a husband and a dad. I never want to let my family down ever again. I screamed into the hospital parking lot, jumped out of the truck, and began running. Only parking spots way in the back. Grabbed my phone, sprinted. Outran the hospitality cart. Nope, gotta go. Good half-mile, right? Track had been my sport in high school, and now I was running the fastest mile of my life. I shoved through the front door of the hospital, slowed down long enough at the information desk to shout, "Labor and delivery?" The receptionist pointed to the right. I ran right, through one set of doors, then another set of doors, took another right, and skidded to a halt when I saw Camre's parents standing in the hallway. I rested my hands on my knees as I tried to catch my breath. "What happened?" I panted. "Where's Camre? How's the baby?" Her mom explained that Camre had to have an emergency C-section, but they didn't have any more information about her or Gavin's condition. She said that when the hospital couldn't reach me, they had called her. She didn't have my work phone, so she called my mom, who then called me. Because they lived so close, her parents had come right over to the hospital to wait for my arrival. "Do you know where Camre is?" I asked again. They said they thought she was still in the delivery room, but no one had really given them any information. "What about Gavin?" I asked. Just then a nurse came out of the door on the right, wheeling a tiny bundle on a cart. She paused and looked at me. "Mr. Curto?" "Yes." I caught a glimpse of a red face, an upturned nose, and dusting of brown hair wrapped in a white blanket. "We have your son. We need to get him into intensive care, but you can visit him in a few minutes. There's a waiting room right over there. We'll come get you when he's ready." My son, my boy. If I could, I would have taken that bundle from her right then and there, and I would have. It seemed completely surreal. My son was in one room, Camre was in another, and I was in a hallway. It was not the way I ever imagined becoming a dad. Instead of a dream come true, this was more like a nightmare. I've said that I'm a fixer, but there was nothing I could do to fix this. All I could do was wait and pray. It was one of the most hopeless feelings of my life. Camry's parents sat down on a lonely little bench in the hall to wait. I was too nervous to sit for long, so I just paced back and forth in front of the door, waiting for it to open again. After what seemed like forever, but actually was only about 10 or 15 minutes, the nurse came to get me. Our first stop was Scrub Station. Everyone who comes into the neonatal intensive care unit has to wash up thoroughly before visiting a baby. As the warm water ran over my hands, I glanced around. If you've never been in a NICU, it's a very odd place. On the one hand, the cries of babies remind you that it's filled with new life, but because all the babies there are either very premature or seriously ill, you always sense fear and worry. During the weeks Gavin spent there, I saw some things that no one should have to see. A lot of very sad things like crying and shaking babies who were born to drug-addicted moms and babies who were not going to live much longer. I saw parents whose hearts were broken, as well as some who, after months, were finally able to take their children home. It's one of the most difficult places a parent can ever be in. I have to give a huge shout out to the nurses in the NICU. They deal with worried parents, sick babies, high-tech machines, and constant stress. Yet they are among the most caring and compassionate people you will ever want to meet. Just being around them always made me feel like Gavin was going to be fine and that whatever happened, I could handle it. The nurse led me to a table where Gavin was screaming his head off. He was 16.5 inches long, but he weighed only 4 pounds. My first thought was, oh my God, he's Camry Jr. He looks just like his mother. My next thought was how tiny he was, lying there on a blue and pink striped blanket with monitors on his chest and an oxygen tube in his nose. I reached out and gently touched his hand. "Hey, buddy, I'm your dad." He squeezed my finger with a shockingly tight grip, my little muscle boy. "He is little," the nurse said to my unasked question, "but he is healthy. We have him here because he is so little and he needs some time for his lungs to develop, but don't worry, he's a perfectly healthy preemie." Oh, thank God. I looked at his 10 perfect little toes. I think every parent can understand that what you want the most is to have a healthy child. I was delighted to have a son, but I was more grateful that he was healthy. I rubbed my fingers along his cheek. He was so precious, so beautiful. I know that every parent thinks their baby is beautiful, and I was no different. I just wanted to sweep him up in my arms and hold him, keep him safe. The nurse said that I could hold him a little later, as soon as they had finished with all their checks and were certain that he was stable. I touched his little head and thought again about how much he looked like his mom. Instantly, I shift from pride and joy to panic and worry. Camry, his mom, do you know where she is? The nurse said that she probably was still in surgery. She explained that when a woman has an emergency C-section, the first priority is to get the baby out. Then they sew the mom up and make sure that she is stable before taking her to a room. I stayed with Gavin for a few more minutes until the nurse said they needed to get him into an incubator. I went back out to tell Camry's parents what I knew and let them know they could see Gavin in a little while. We kept waiting for news about Camry, and eventually we were told that she was being transferred to the intensive care unit on the 3rd floor, and we could see her in about an hour. I didn't really understand the significance of going to the ICU instead of labor and delivery, but too much had happened in too short of a time for me to ask any questions. At the time, none of us knew what had happened to Camry other than she had had a C-section. It wouldn't be for a couple weeks that we learned she had had a severe brain injury from loss of oxygen and had completely lost her memory. That first day, we all assumed she just needed extra care because of the rush of the surgery. Had I known then what we faced, that I was going to be on my own, raising a child and being a caregiver, I would have been a lot more worried. But at the time, I just took things as they came. Actually, that's the way I still handle things. I just take them as they come and remind myself that I can get through it. I've learned that if you face issues as they arise and not spend too much time worrying about the future or regretting the past, you can do almost anything. That's one thing I've tried to remind Camre and teach Gavin. You're always stronger than you think you are, and you can do more than you think you can. I've got this. Sometimes I have to remind myself as well, but I truly do try to live by that motto. My mom arrived shortly after we learned Camre had been transferred to the ICU. She and Camre's parents were allowed into the NICU to meet their grandson. As I said, my mom was excited, but Camre's parents were really excited because he was the first boy in the family in a very long time. We took a lot of pictures that day because I figured that Camre would want to see what her baby looked like when he was first born. Little did any of us realize that those pictures were going to become the only memories Camre would ever have of Gavin as a newborn. Even now when we look at them, I know that she doesn't remember anything. I see the sadness in her eyes when, for the 1000th time, she realizes that she doesn't remember, and it breaks my heart. Finally, I was told that I could go see Camre. I left Gavin to the care of the nurses and his doting grandparents. As I rode the elevator to the 3rd floor, I wasn't sure what to expect. All I had been told was that she had continued to have trouble breathing after the surgery, so she was intubated and sedated. I steeled myself before entering the unit, which was a good thing. If you've never had to spend time in an ICU, count your blessings. It's like NICU times 10. Like the NICU, it is dark and quiet, but the feeling of hope and new life that comes with babies is completely absent. Everyone in ICU is fighting for their lives. It can feel as if death itself is hiding in every corner. As I was shown to Camre's bedside, I tried not to look at any of the other patients, but I couldn't help it. Some of them were all alone, but others had 1 or 2 people by their beds. Machines beeped, monitors whirred, alarms sounded. I don't usually feel afraid of most things, but I felt myself clenching my teeth, so I knew I was more anxious than I realized. Camre was lying on her back with a tube down her throat, an IV in her arm. The jagged line of a monitor recorded every beat of her heart. She looked like she was sleeping, but she was so still, I peered closely to make sure she was still breathing. When I saw the faint rise and fall of her chest, I let myself relax a bit. She didn't look anything like the spunky, determined woman I had left the night before. Her usually thin face was puffy. Her skin was drawn and colorless. "Hey, honey, I'm here," I said, touching her hand. I watched for some sign of recognition, some response, but there was nothing. "What happened?" I asked the nurse on duty. She said that she would get a doctor to explain as soon as she could. That's sort of the way it went over the next several days. I'd ask questions, someone would say that they would try to get an answer, but no answer would come. As I looked back, I realized that the doctors themselves didn't know exactly what had happened, so they were trying to put us off until they understood the situation better. I get that's what was happening, but it would have been so much easier on all of us if someone had just given us whatever information they had at the time. Waiting and not knowing anything is so much harder than waiting and knowing something. I stayed by Camre's side for as long as I could, watching her breathe and looking at her heartbeat on the monitor. She never moved, never stirred. Eventually, the nurse gently suggested that I go get some rest, adding that they would call me on my cell if there were any change. Reluctantly, I left Camre to tell our parents what little I knew about her condition. As I headed back downstairs to the NICU, I realized the one bright spot was that I was now the dad I had always dreamed of being. I scrubbed up again and located Gavin's incubator. I wanted to hold him more than anything, even if it was just for a few seconds. The nurse put him in my arms, and my mom snapped a picture on her phone. That photo in particular always chokes me up. I'm sitting in a chair holding Gavin for the first time and kissing the top of his head. You can't see my face or Gavin's because I'm bent over holding him against my chest. I remember thinking at the time how amazing it was to be a dad and promising that I would always be there for him and his mom, no matter what. It's a promise that even today I would give my life to keep.
Absolutely loving this book. Okay, I can't wait to find out what's going to happen next. Maybe we'll have some time real soon to at least record it so we'll know what's going on, but you won't. If you want to read this book on your own time frame instead of waiting for us, it is available through Amazon, and you can show some love by using the link in the video description below to purchase it. And, you know, it's Amazon affiliate link, so she gets a little kickback for all that work she's doing. Okay, love you guys. See you soon. Bye.